I stood there, clutching my bouquet like it could anchor me to the ground. The scent of roses and peonies was almost too much. Sweet, thick, overwhelming. The music had stopped. The whispers had started. I could feel all their eyes on me, even as they tried to look anywhere else. Jason wasn't behind the curtain. He wasn't texting back. He wasn't answering his phone. I told myself he was just running late. But deep down, something colder had already settled in my chest. That aisle, the one I had dreamed about walking down since I was 12, it stretched out like a bad joke, petals perfectly placed, candles flickering like they knew something I didn't. I caught my maid of honor's eyes, and she looked completely lost. The best man couldn't even meet my gaze. People shifted in their chairs like they were watching something they shouldn't be seeing. I felt like a scene from a tragedy no one volunteered to attend. Then came the quiet voice of the officiant, whispering that we'd need to cancel. No big announcement, just a soft, embarrassed decision. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned and walked back down the aisle, the wrong way, trying to hold on to whatever dignity I had left. I stepped outside and the sunlight felt almost cruel, too bright, too cheerful, like it hadn't gotten the memo. People followed behind me, friends, family, strangers with solemn faces, but no one said much. What could they say? I could hear heels clicking on pavement, murmured phone calls, someone trying to hold back tears that weren't even theirs. I just kept walking. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had to keep moving so the heartbreak didn't catch up. I ended up in a side hallway, one of those quiet places tucked between event rooms. I sat on a chair meant for someone's coat and stared at the floor. My dress, the one I had dreamed about, saved for, twirled around in, suddenly felt heavy, like it belonged to someone else, someone lucky, someone chosen. I kept looking at my phone, waiting for his name to flash across the screen. Nothing. No call, no message, just that gut-wrenching silence that says more than any words ever could. That silence, that was the part that broke me the most, because it meant he'd made his choice. He didn't just leave me standing there. He chose not to explain. Not to face me, not even a lie to cling to. I was dressed for commitment. He never even showed up for honesty. Later that night, I peeled off the dress alone in my apartment, piece by piece, like I was undoing someone else's fairy tale. The zipper snagged, and I nearly screamed. Not because it hurt, but because everything else did. The silence was still there, louder than ever. No knock at the door, no headlights in the driveway, no explanation. Just me, sitting on the edge of the bed in a slip, mascara dried in the corners of my eyes, wondering how the hell I'd ended up here. I thought maybe he'd come by. Maybe he'd at least have the guts to show his face and say something. Anything. But there was no sign of him. Not even a pathetic voicemail. I checked his social media. Nothing. It was like he vanished, like I dreamed him into being and he'd simply disappeared the moment it got real. And still, I didn't cry. Not that night. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't find the energy to fall apart. What stunned me most wasn't the abandonment. It was the ease, the way he slipped out of my life like it was a coat he no longer wanted to wear. But a part of me, the smallest, sharpest part, knew this wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. 3 days later, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address, no warning. Just my name on the front in his handwriting, that lazy slant I used to think was charming. For a second, I felt something flicker. Hope, maybe, or dread. I opened it with the kind of care you'd use for a wound you're not sure has healed. The first line didn't say sorry. It said, "I didn't know how else to do this." As if disappearing on your wedding day required creativity. He went on about doubts, about feeling trapped, about not wanting to hurt me, like hurt was something he had managed to avoid. He wrote in circles, dressing up cowardice in phrases like, "It wouldn't have been fair to you," and "You deserve someone all in." As if he were the hero for leaving. As if walking out mid-promise was some kind of emotional mercy. I read the whole thing once, carefully, like it would fall apart if I breathed too hard. Then I folded it back up and left it on the kitchen counter. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't text a friend or call my mom. It was like watching a fire burn down to embers. No more panic, just quiet. I sat with that silence for a while, staring at the letter like it might explain itself better if I waited long enough. The worst part? He actually thought the letter was closure, like wrapping betrayal in cursive made it less brutal. There was no ownership, no mention of vows or guests or the hollow way my name must have sounded when they announced the cancellation. He just wrote like he'd skipped out on a bad dinner date, not a lifelong promise. Every sentence tried to spin it as something noble. I had to be honest with myself, as if honesty meant vanishing without a word. I remember tracing my finger over one line. This wasn't easy for me. That was the moment I felt something twist. Not sadness, not even anger, just disbelief. Because he'd turned it all into his pain, his journey, his freedom. There was no room in that letter for the girl he left at the altar. I realized he hadn't just left me. He'd rewritten the whole story so he could sleep at night. And that's what stung. Not the leaving, but the erasing. I didn't respond, didn't even touch the envelope again. It sat there like a dead thing on the counter, something you don't bury because it never really lived. Some people cry for days. Others write long messages they'll never send. But me? I just let it sit, and I made peace with the silence. Because if he thought he'd get the last word, he clearly forgot who I was before I ever loved him. Before Jason, I used to pride myself on never needing anyone. I built my own life, my own career, signed my own lease, celebrated my own wins. But love, real love, makes you soften a little. Makes you open doors you once kept bolted shut. And I had opened them for him. All of them. That's why the letter didn't just feel like a breakup. It felt like theft. Like he'd taken pieces of me he never earned and mailed back the apology card unsigned. That night, I poured a glass of wine and reread my own vows, the ones I'd written weeks before, tucked into the drawer of my nightstand. They were honest, vulnerable, clumsy in places, but they were mine. And they were real. I folded them up, kissed the paper like it was a goodbye, and burned it in the sink. Not out of bitterness, but because those words deserved more than silence. They deserved a flame. I didn't need his guilt. I didn't need his reasons. What I needed now was something else entirely. I didn't know what that was yet, but I knew it wouldn't come in an envelope. A week later, I called the venue. I told them I needed to pick up some things we'd left behind: candles, place cards, the floral arch we never used. It was a practical call, just tying up loose ends. But part of me was hoping for something else. I kept thinking, people don't just vanish. Not really. So right before we hung up, I asked, as casually as I could, if they happened to have any surveillance footage from the weekend. They did. Parking lot cameras, motion triggered. And when the manager said he'd send over the clips, I told him thank you like it was nothing. But inside, my heart was pounding. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe just Jason leaving early. Or pacing the lot, panicking. Something human. Something that made sense. I waited until after dinner to open the file. I told myself I'd probably find nothing, but I found everything. There he was, on the screen, 2 nights before the wedding, pulling a woman into his arms like she was the reason he still had a heartbeat. They kissed like no one was watching. Like love was something easy and consequence-free. It was slow, passionate, unmistakably intimate. I didn't need a name. I didn't need context. I knew exactly what I was looking at, and I finally understood what he was running from. I didn't cry. Not when I paused the video. Not when I watched it again. I just sat there, jaw clenched, feeling something colder than heartbreak settle in my chest. It wasn't grief anymore. It was clarity, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. It just arrives. He didn't get cold feet. He didn't get overwhelmed. He made a choice. Days before he was supposed to promise me forever, he gave part of himself to someone else. Willingly, shamelessly. I replayed the moment 3 times. Not because I needed confirmation, but because I wanted to remember the exact second I stopped loving him. There was something oddly powerful about having proof, about knowing I hadn't made this up, hadn't overreacted. This wasn't about being left. This was about being lied to. Betrayed behind my back while I was writing vows and finalizing menus. He didn't just abandon me, he humiliated me. So I downloaded the footage, marked the timestamp, and drafted a single email. No subject, no body, just the video file attached. I sent it to every member of his family, parents, siblings, cousins, all the people who'd sent me sympathy texts and pitying looks. Let them see what I saw. Let them feel what I felt. He took my dignity in front of guests. I returned the favor in front of blood. The moment I hit send, I didn't flinch. I didn't hover over the screen or brace for fallout. I just stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the ice melt. There was no dramatic music, no shaking hands, just calm. It was the kind of calm you earn when you stop waiting for justice and decide to hand it out yourself. I wasn't trying to ruin him. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted the truth in the open, where it couldn't hide behind tuxedos and toasts. By midnight, my phone lit up. His mother, his sister, a cousin I barely knew. Message after message, some apologizing, others in disbelief. One said, "I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of this." And she was right. I didn't. I gave my whole heart, and he gave a performance. Now the curtain was down, and the audience finally saw what had been behind it. I didn't respond to anyone. Not even the people who meant well. I just watched the little typing bubbles come and go and thought, he started this quietly, I ended it clearly. And I wasn't done yet. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, not yet, but sharper. Like the air had been cleared with something bracing and cold. My phone was full of unread messages. Apologies from people who had once toasted to our love. Angry texts from his friends, some trying to defend him, most too stunned to even try. And then there was one from his mother. Simple, brutal in its honesty. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I stared at it for a long time. I almost felt sorry for her. Then came the call. Jason. I didn't pick up, of course, but I let it ring out just to feel that moment, the shift in power. The man who left me in front of 100 guests now needed my silence more than I ever needed his words. A voicemail followed. You didn't have to do that. We could have talked. No apology. Just panic. Just a boy caught in the act, trying to negotiate with the fire after it already started burning. I saved the voicemail, not to listen again, but to remember what fear sounds like when it finally finds the right owner. And while he scrambled for control, I started clearing out the wreckage. The dress, sold. The honeymoon, canceled and partially refunded. And me? I booked a solo retreat, the kind that doesn't ask for plus ones. He left me waiting for a future. I left him with his past. People say revenge is messy, but this didn't feel messy. It felt necessary, like setting a bone after a fracture. It might hurt for a moment, but it puts things back in place. I wasn't out to ruin him. That would have required more energy than he was worth. I just wanted the lies to stop having so much room to breathe, and now they didn't. Everyone knew. He couldn't twist the story anymore, couldn't play the confused victim, couldn't pretend he just got cold feet. I didn't parade it around. I didn't post it online. I didn't even tell most of my friends. I just moved, one decision at a time. I boxed up the wedding decorations, donated what I didn't want, and deleted the shared playlists. Funny how much space someone takes up in your life until you start reclaiming it, drawer by drawer, login by login. There was a strange comfort in the routine of it, in choosing myself over and over again, without apology. One night, I lit a candle in the living room, one I had been saving for the honeymoon. It filled the room with lavender and citrus. I poured a glass of wine and sat alone on the couch, wrapped in silence. Not the kind he left me in, a new kind, one I chose. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without checking my phone. I won't pretend there weren't moments where the weight came back, a song in a cafe, a save the date from another couple in the mail. Random reminders that life didn't stop just because mine had split open. But even then, I didn't spiral. I didn't let it undo me. Instead, I let those moments pass through me, like waves. I was learning to float, not flail. And there's something powerful about realizing you can carry sadness without letting it bury you. Jason kept reaching out, first the calls, then emails, then a letter sent through a friend. He didn't want to get back together, not really. He wanted redemption without accountability. He wanted to hear me say, "It's okay." But I never did. Because it wasn't, and it never would be. Some wounds don't need bandages. They need air, truth, and time. He wasn't part of my healing. He was the reason I needed it. So I left the door closed. I let him sit in the silence he once gave so freely, and while he looked backward, I started looking inward. Not at what I'd lost, but at what I'd protected. My self-worth, my voice, my future. He thought he was escaping something that would trap him. What he really walked away from was the best thing he never got to know. Months passed. Seasons changed. And with them, so did I. Not in dramatic, movie montage kind of ways. No drastic haircuts or sudden reinventions. Just small shifts, deeper sleep, quieter mornings, a softness I didn't recognize at first. Healing doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it's just the moment you realize you haven't thought about them in days. That the silence in your home no longer feels empty. It feels earned. Friends started dropping hints. "You should meet my coworker. I know someone who'd be perfect for you." I smiled, thanked them, and gently declined. Not because I was closed off, but because for once I didn't feel like something was missing. I wasn't waiting to be chosen again. I had already chosen myself, and that felt bigger than any bouquet or ring ever had. It wasn't about moving on. It was about moving up. Some nights I'd light the same lavender candle and pour the same glass of wine. But the feeling had changed. There was no tension in my shoulders. No phantom ache where his promises used to sit. Just peace. Not loud or flashy, but real. And mine. Completely mine. I didn't post quotes about healing, didn't write long captions about rising from the ashes. I didn't need to prove anything. Not to him, not to anyone. My peace didn't live online. It lived in the way I started humming while doing the dishes, in the way I walked into rooms without scanning for exits, in the calm I felt when I passed our old cafe and kept walking. No lump in my throat. No need to turn away. That's the thing no one tells you. Healing isn't loud. It's not some grand announcement. It's quiet, almost unnoticeable. One morning, you wake up and realize you didn't rehearse a confrontation in your head. You didn't brace for his name in conversation. You didn't ache. You just lived, fully, honestly, unapologetically. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you stop making space for what broke you. People think closure comes in a neat little box, an apology, a confession, a proper ending. But I learned it doesn't. Sometimes closure is simply the decision to stop waiting for what never arrived. And I had done that. Long ago, or at least, I thought I had. Then, one afternoon, it arrived. Another letter. Same handwriting. Same slant. No return address. My heart didn't race this time. I didn't brace or pause or imagine what it might say. I just looked at it for what it was. One last attempt to be part of a story he no longer belonged to. I didn't need to know if it held apologies or explanations. I didn't need to read another carefully crafted excuse from a man who had already said everything through his silence. So I tore it in half. Clean, straight down the center. No hesitation. And I dropped it into the trash like I was letting go of the last weight he'd ever try to hand me. No anger, no satisfaction, just finality. Because the truth was, I didn't need closure anymore. I had built something stronger in its place. Boundaries, clarity, peace. I didn't need to understand him. I just needed to keep choosing myself, over and over again. Some people spend their whole lives chasing closure like it's a door someone else is supposed to open. But not me. Not anymore. I learned that walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's wisdom. And from that day forward, I promised myself one thing. I would never wait again.